Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. This is such an exciting opportunity for all of us. CPAD presents the graduate online teaching practicum, and 4 graduate students are here who have completed the practicum and they're back to share their research. So we thought this would be a nice opportunity to use the CPAD lab and for each of them to talk about things that are really exciting to them. So we have 3 graduate students from art education and 1 graduate student from music education. And they will each introduce themselves, but I just wanna thank everyone for being here, and to Yang and Yusul and Zina and Rain for their passion and their commitment to the practicum and for coming back and sharing their research. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm the first presenter of this presentation, and I'm In Kyung Hwang from Art Education and Women's Gender and Sexuality Study. I'm currently in 2nd year student as a doctoral candidate. And for those who are gonna listening today in Zoom, I can describe myself. I had ivory colored skin. I have black long hair, and I'm wearing my blue sweaters. Then I can start my presentation. So the title of my presentation is Addressing Critical Multiculturalism Through Online Museum Education. So this presentation is about my reflection on my online museum education practices as a museum educator who is from Asia. My museum education practice was in the exhibition named Global Asia's Contemporary Asian and Asian American Art from the collection of Jordan D. Schnitzer and his family foundation, held from August to December 2021 at the Palmer Museum of Art at Penn State University. Curated by art history faculty Dr. Chang Tan, who is from China, the exhibition features the cosmopolitan, exuberant, and subtly subversive work from 15 artists of Asian heritage who are adept at crossing borders, not only physical ones, but also those in media, styles, and materials. The artists such as Dinkyu Lei, Do Ho Seo, Hong Liu, Rikrit Vanya goes beyond their geographical boundaries, reshape their identities, and embody diverse cultural aesthetics through this exhibition. This exhibition aims to provide an opportunity to embody pluralized Asias, which has a great deal of fluidity in a global context, and show the transformative power of Asian and Asian American art to our visitors. However, our educational goals seems a little bit challenging to achieve while our initial education planning, because the Palmer Museum of Art at Penn State is a university-based museum located in central Pennsylvania State College, where over 60% of students and almost 90% of the residents in the county are white. Except a few of graduate assistants, almost every docent in the museum is also white middle class senior citizens. Regarding this demography, the education team must facilitate not only students, but also docents to think broadly about how Asia has long served as an imaginative construct and how Asian art has been objectified as foreign based on colonial and Orientalist epistemology. Planning of education for this exhibition, our education team decided to focus on diversifying students' understanding of contemporary Asian art and intervening traditional narratives of US and Eurocentric art history. The key to success for our museum education that we educators found was building a community network with local Asian communities. According to museum education researcher Kay Allison Wickens, community involvement such as exhibiting collection with community voices together can engage visitors' emotion and improve their experiences. Museum curatorial team and education team thought that bringing lived experiences as Asian immigrants that has often been erased and concealed in the museum can cultivate an in-depth understanding of cultural diversity and fluidity of Asian and Asian art. Thus, we constructed Community Voices section in the museum, and we recruited various Asian people from the university and local communities to collect and record their lived experiences as Asian in the United States. Recorded videos were played in the Community Voices section in the exhibition and personal mapping area. We also posted to the YouTube, so we wanted to assess their we wanted to spread their lived experiences to diverse visitors from in person and also in the online spaces. We also sought to increase K-12 and university students' access to education resources, especially online resources. Since the exhibition was open during the COVID-19 pandemic, we could not run any outreach program and only can run a small-size guided tour for limited university classes. Instead, our education museum team developed virtual exhibitions of global Asia's online art making video and teaching resources for K-12 educators. Lots of teachers in local schools responded that the education resources opened the opportunity to talk about Asian art and even further racism and anti-Asian racism in current pandemic situation. I can show you this each practices later on my presentation. And here is an online art club video we posted in the YouTube, and we regularly post every theme of the art making by undergraduate students to connect between students and students who are who wants to create arts at home, and we want to make a regular online art classes through this kind of video interaction. We also construct family guide, and we distributed on the family day at the museum event, but also we uploaded to our webpage, and we also regularly send out a notification email to community schools and a lot of community to extend their accessibility to these resources. And here is another event, virtual museum conversation. So we invite some artists who featured in our exhibition, like here is Jacob Hashimoto. And also we had an opportunity to make a conversation between visitors and the curators about the exhibition. But we also pursued the hybrid museum teaching. So there were family day tours, curators, gallery talks, including her lived experiences as Asian scholars. And students' Chinese music performances is one of the entertainment of the museum events. And many visitors valued these practices, cultivating a sense of belonging and critiquing the marginalization of contemporary Asian art, and even further, anti-Asian racism. However, while at the end of our museum education practices, I eventually asked to myself, are educators really transcending beyond boundaries between cultures and communities through this online teaching practice? Starting from this question, I would like to share my pedagogical insights reflected in the framework of critical multicultural education that aims to explore subjugated knowledge of non-dominant culture. First, museum educators should use a critical lens toward the ongoing power structure in the white dominant society, rather than flattened narratives of diversity. As Juneja notes that many Asian artists have been forced to attain credentials in the artwork only by reaffirming national identities and remixing it with contemporary globalist aesthetics. This is reflected in this exhibition as well, addressing artists' embodied experiences as an Asian diaspora and in between identities. However, rather than a critical reflection about racism and colonialism, some of our education practice focuses merely on each work's traditional cultural aspects related to their each nationality. These strategies were not enough to fully address the ongoing structural oppression and Asia's emerging cultural identities. As art education researcher Acuff claims, that critical multiculturalist education requires a heightened level of consciousness toward an equitable power structure in our society. Thus, museum educators should facilitate visitors to understand the Asian artist's diverse cultural identities and aspirations toward an equitable society. Second, museum education should illuminate the interwoven relationship between cultures and cultural knowledge. For example, when I centered on a Vietnamese artist in South Asia, I focused on the relationship only between the US and Vietnam and exclude the relationships between other Asian cultures. Also, our education practices were developed based on East Asian cultural background and aesthetics, since the majority of works in the exhibition were from East Asian artists. As Acuff and Evans claim, critical multicultural museum education should interrogate normalized knowledge of the dominant culture and negate the erasure of subjugated cultural knowledge. Thus, we should have considered a multidimensional affiliation between cultures, not to force East Asian-centered Pan-Asian model of global Asians. Thirdly, educators should include diverse voices and develop the agency of community members. In our community voice video, 10 Asian immigrants participants' counter-narratives were empowering. But I have to admit that almost everyone in the video was educated middle-class Asians related to the university. This limited collaboration results in the exclusion of various narratives of local Asian people from different classes. Additionally, in some contexts, it can paradoxically reinforce the master narrative of Asian as a model minority, by exclusively projecting lived experiences of high achievers in the Asian community. As Krebs claimed that museums should build awareness toward inclusion through community engagement. In this regard, educators should contemplate how to embrace diversities in marginalized communities to construct inclusive art museum education. Also, instead of showing refined narratives of a few people, we should seek how to collaboratively construct museum education with visitors to illuminate their agency in museum education. As museum educator Dana Klotzka asserts, decentering museums' institutional authorities will be a significant stepping stone for this goal. Contemporary museums have constantly sought to increase connection and collaboration with diverse sociocultural institutions and communities. According to Edenal et al., museum educators should cross the cultural borders by initiating critical dialogue with visitors and promoting diverse narratives. It underlines the need of critical reflection on flattened narratives of diversity and community building. Through this, I believe that we can push beyond cultural boundaries and dismantle monolithic perceptions about Asian art and Asianness. This reminds us the importance of interactive communication in online museum education as well. Through diversified visitors' narratives, we can cultivate a better version of multicultural museum education. Thus, we should keep exploring the way to construct interactive online museum education and actively facilitate visitors to engage in the education with their lived experiences and narratives. So my presentation is ended, but I would like to share my museum practices in online museum practices in detail. So here are some of my, sorry. So here is a virtual museum tour about the global Asians. We constructed this virtual museum tour using Google Slides by a graduate assistant at Palmer Museum and undergraduate students. So, welcome to the Palmer Museum of Art's virtual tour of global Asians
contemporary Asian and Asian American work from the collections of Jordan nations and the Foundation.
Thank you. So we constructed this virtual museum tour using various video recordings, and also we construct this kind of virtual museum graphical images. So we just put each artworks in the virtual spaces, and visitors can freely explore the exhibition and then click each artworks and get the description about the works. Yes, I have to.
For 2 decades of his professional career. The scrolls stretch more than 80 feet altogether and feature.
So here we can see the museum educator, Rennie Breslin, and she lead our team to construct this kind of whole museum virtual tours. And at the end of the museum virtual tours, we connect some kind of global Asia resources that we've constructed for online museum education resources. So here is a tools for teacher. So I connected art making of thread drawing with the artwork of artist Do Ho-seo, who is from South Korea, which is my home country. So in here, we share some extensive works that we cannot bring into our museum exhibitions. So we just want to extend about cultural boundaries and understanding about each artist.
Where he lived in his early childhood, to his more
And also, we put some art making videos like this.
personal narratives to students to replicate all and each
Here,
material.
we try to show how to make thread drawing in a various way and how to adapt it to each art education in the schools or communities. And also we put some discussion questions about to bring many thoughts about Asian art and anti-Asian racism. And there are some reference images and questions, and we keep construct and keep build each resources to link between each resources, because sometimes many teachers complain about that they have limited accessibility from just monolithic perception of Asian American art. And also previous year when we distribute limited amount of the teaching resources, many teachers actually asked us to bring a more extensive works of various artists and various teaching materials. So we try to build as many teaching resources in this one exhibition. So we try to connect it to the academic standards of the American education and K-12 education. So, and the other thing I can show you is the online art club video. This is made by undergraduate students who are having an internship in museums. So they are all in art education departments. So this is kind of their practice of their own art education practice, but also we try to make a connection between undergraduate students and K-12 schools, and also the community in our, not limited to the Center County, but also the whole other communities in America, in the United States, and also even the world. So.
We're weaving. But first, let's start with a simple paper weaving project. To do this project, all you need are a few sheets. The slits can be as far apart or as close together as you want, but here I'm separating them evenly by about ½ inch. Once all your slits are cut, you should unfold the paper and see a border around the slits, kind of like a picture frame. Once you have the base done, you're ready to start making your strips. Grab your second paper. This time, you will just be cutting the paper into even strips as you see me doing. But this time, start with going under the first slit. Repeat this with all of the strips until the base paper is full.
So by distributing this art making video, we try to facilitate many learners to make their own art at home. And also we try to facilitate to share it through the Instagram or Facebook using a hashtag Palmer Museum of Art. But I think our education team is keep being skeptical about this kind of practices because on the surface level, it is really great, extensive accessibility, offering some accessibility of various students and communities. But also we have to admit that these kind of communication is more like a top-down narrative. So we are thinking about how to make our own museum education teaching, online museum education teaching to be more interactive and how to listen to their voices about about what they want to learn and how their learning was going. So that is the most challenging part for us by far. So I hope I can present next year with a more developed art online museum teaching. Thank you.
Okay, that should be everything.
All right, hi everyone. Welcome to my presentation, Redefining Contextual Learning in Online Settings. All right, about me. So I am a first-year doctoral student at the School of Music here at Penn State, studying music education. That is me without the mask and with longer hair. So here I am in all my glory. Prior to Penn State, I taught elementary and secondary general music and choir in upstate New York for several years, and I absolutely loved it. During this time, I gained a lot of experience teaching online and teaching kindergarteners through the screen and in my living room was a wonder, trying to engage all that. So I gained a lot of experience doing that, which has really made me rethink about the context for teaching and learning in general, and especially towards the arts. These ideas were further inspired by a previous professor of mine, Dr. Randall Alsep at Teachers College, Columbia University. He's a specialist in music creativity. And we did a class where, this is also online, where we had to go out and use our surroundings to inspire our music creativity. So I was out in the storm with my phone, collecting raindrops from different houses, and that was a lot of fun. Furthermore, my dad is an architect, and he's one of my biggest role models. So growing up, I watched him move from the Philippines, go to Singapore, and then come back to America. And I just watched how the different landscapes has adapted the way that he designs. And right now he's designing homes and apartment buildings. So he's a really big inspiration for who I am and what I do. As a music educator, I strive to engage meaningful experiences with my students. I really believe in the power of relationships, building relationships. I advocate for the access in education, and I strive to design experiences that are culturally responsive and relevant. So today we'll get a chance to look at some projects, and you will also get a chance to participate in some of these projects. Let's define contextual learning. So contextual learning is rooted in the constructivist theory. Individuals construct meaning through interacting and interpreting their environments. It emphasizes problem solving. It recognizes that teaching and learning occur in multiple contexts. This is really important when we consider online learning too. It encourages students to learn from one another, and it assists students to monitor learning so that they become self-regulated learners. But it's also important to think how they might become lifelong learners too. So using the lens, music and architecture, I wanted to sort of blend it considering my audience. We are going to find ways, we can find ways that redefine contextual learning by expanding our idea of space. I'm going to repeat that again. We can find ways that redefine contextual learning by expanding our idea of space. It's important to consider how the effects of the pandemic, especially in particular to socio-emotional learning. I know that my students are going through this, and the students that they're also mentoring, we're going through some sort of socio-emotional learning, and how the transformation of technology plays a pivotal role in these spaces. So how can we connect beyond the conventional means and boundaries? And how can we sustain and develop our possible selves, student selves, particularly through online settings? So through a process that I was inspired by Andrea Creed, she wrote this book, Context for Music Learning and Participation, and talking about developing your possible selves and sustaining your possible selves. She talks about this process where you go through discovering, reflecting, imagining, thinking, and growing. And then I also added a picture on the other side, a diagram, where you're also sort of kind of going through this journey of yourself, sort of being influenced by your environment, but also being influenced with others too. So here's a project example. I did this project with my younger students, but I also did it with my older students, graduate students, and doctoral students. So this can be really applicable for any age. So the first thing that we did was we looked at an example of a visual blueprint. So this is a traditional style. You can see that you're looking from up above. You have your different bedrooms. You have, wow, a really big garage. You have your dining rooms and a deck even. And so I use this visual blueprint to start thinking about how I might apply this to do a self-reflection of myself. To start thinking about who I am, who I want to be, my own interest, and even realizing my own subjectivities. So here's my self-reflective blueprint, and I'm going to be a little bit vulnerable here too with you. So when I think about the bedroom, I think of that as a really private space. That's my inner thoughts, who I am, personal identity, and I would say that I am a dreamer. I'm also very scatterbrained. I'm optimistic, and I'm also an overthinker. Now, when I go out into the living room, this is me interacting who I am with others. So I would say, like, I'm friendly, I'm outgoing, I'm positive, but I'm also a little bit guarded because I'm thinking about those boundaries. And then maybe if I get to know you a little bit more, I'll let you kind of sort of figure out who I am, my inner thoughts. Dining room, formal goals, independence. I want to strive to be a better educator. I'm an advocate. For me, the kitchen is really fun. I really enjoy cooking. So I think of this more as like a hobby. So my hobbies are like to go on walks. I love dogs. I love nature. I love being out in the community. And then for me, backyard is a little bit more informal. And so that's me like, okay, maybe I want to be more adventurous. This is me starting to be a little bit adventurous and to be brave and try new things. So I was thinking, okay, how can I take that even further and sort of make it even more of a visual blueprint? So this is a little bit about me. I did this a year ago, kind of reflecting of who I am. As you can see, I did my best. I probably should have used a ruler. I'm so sorry. But there it is. I did my best. you can see that like here, I'm a Pisces, that kind of maybe contributes a little bit to my overthinking, I don't know, my dreamer. And then as you sort of go around, you see a kind of a sneak peek windows looking at of who I am. But this is not necessarily like you're only getting like a sneak brief. You're only looking through the windows. You're only looking from above. And so I did this sort of experiment with another student. And we discovered that we had similar ideas, but we also had differences. So if you read through this person's blueprint, when you get to the kitchen, so instead of hobbies, where I found it to be something fun, this person saw the kitchen as a place or a space for sustenance, like something that they couldn't live without. So this person was saying, oh, family, friends, and excitement. And then instead of a backyard, they were stating that, oh, this is where I do my hobbies. I'm going to do a game room instead. And so they listed video games, competition, and nature with that. So you're starting to see some differences, like what my home, who I am, is different and similar in many ways than another person's. So it kind of makes you think how the definitions of home are going to vary from person to person. And that's going to be the same thing when you look at your students, especially in online settings. And I put here, note, homes change, because who you are, like present, past, present, future, is going to change. And I put this slide here just to kind of show you an example of all the different kinds of homes, but there might be more that you're thinking of. And like I said, homes change. Maybe your student lives on an island, so they can't really replicate that blueprint that we're starting to talk about. Or I had a friend who was living in an RV for a year, and so that is different. Or maybe you live in the city and you live in this tall skyscraper. It's going to look very different. So when you talk about this, you can think about the relevancy, but you can also say, I can create a visual and oral representation of who I am and who I want to be. And it can start at this level, or it could start at the level that you might think is more comfortable, but it's going to vary in complexity. So the next step I asked was, if you were to draw who you were as a home, what would it look like? And I asked a student in their 20s to draw out what they were as a home. And it kind of gave me a sneak preview of like, okay, how would I describe this person? So go ahead and take a minute and we'll walk through some of the descriptions that this individual drew. So there's a hobbit door. I don't know if you've seen Lord of the Rings. So we have a hobbit door entering in. There's two layers to this. I believe this is the individual as a stick figure. Yeah. But if we go down, let's go down, go down this whimsical slide. We enter into another space. So there's tables, there's chairs surrounding this one table, but here in the kitchen, they listed, they're going to be playing some Spotify upbeat playlist. So it kind of makes me think, what kind of music do they listen to? What kind of music are they playing in this space here? And then they have a ball pit, which is super fun, a ball pit room. And they included that they would be playing whale sounds in the ball pit room, which kind of makes me think, okay, why whale sounds? I'm interested about that. And then they have a tunnel. And I believe that I believe they put whale sounds so that they could communicate with their neighbor from a block away. So it kind of starts making you think, why would they put that? And what kind of sounds are they assigning to each room or each space? Cool. Here's another project example. And the question that I'm going to state here is, how can we be inspired by context and by our environment? So I was looking through the Digitally Engaged Learning Conference. I know some of you are involved in that. And I came across this prompt that a past professor did. It's titled Remote Islands, Radio Plays, Teaching Soundscape Composition and the Uncertain Future of the Anthropocene. And this sentence here really stuck out to me. So let me read it. Students in the very large island city-states of Hong Kong and Singapore find parallels between their own lives and narratives from very tiny island places. So it's making me think, wow, what kind of connections can you make, you know, from another space to yours, especially when you're teaching and learning, and how can we use what we have now to sort of make those connections? So looking at our environment, one example that we can do is to create soundscapes, as she mentioned. So soundscapes are a collection of sounds. It can consist of nature. So I was talking about with that project that I did with Dr. Randall also, I went out and I was collecting rain sounds, and then I started collecting voices, and I sort of made this composition that represented that. Another friend of mine did voice memos, where she collected voice memos from her family members and sort of created this composition to sort of showcase, like, family is a really big part of who I am, and I want to show that. Another colleague of mine did something similar, but they used it in a way that kind of speaks for social justice too. We're going to take a look at this video at the end when we do an activity, but some of the concepts that are being explored in this video are the following. Go ahead and take a moment to look. And so when I was thinking about the environment and some surroundings, here's a couple pictures of interesting pictures that kind of stood out to me. And I started in my mind thinking, what are some words that come up, and how might I describe these pictures to sort of exemplify this in a soundscape? So this was a sample project that I asked a fellow graduate student to look at. So disregard this picture over here. We'll talk about that in a moment. But I asked this graduate student, hey, take a look at this and kind of create something out of it. And I also told the graduate student, feel free to kind of challenge my descriptions, etc. And they composed using something called Soundtrap. Have any of you used Soundtrap before? No? Okay, so Soundtrap is a composition software. It is free, so you can go home and you can start going about this if you'd like. It's free, and then I'll show you a really cool kind of app thing that goes along with it that makes it really special. But here you can go through loops and you can sort of add things. So this student was inspired, and then we're going to talk a little bit about it after. I'm going to ask you, what did you notice from this person's composition? Great. What did you notice? Or what did you hear? Yeah, go ahead.
The kind of synthetic baseline.
Synthetic baseline. And how do you think it related to the pictures here?
It felt maybe more dark and closed off to me.
Anyone want to add to that? Maybe, yeah, Tina.
I feel like the layers that were projected at different times allowed my mind to go into different places. and be within that isolated. Because I would focus on a certain sound that was added and separate myself from the previous layer.
So when I asked this person, what were you thinking when you were going through this journey of making the soundscape? They did start off with the last picture, the dark closed off hallway, and kind of started encompassing all of this, but they did start off in this dark closed off hallway wanting to add these layers of sound. So it kind of makes me think, okay, so this could be a starting foundation here, but I wonder how you might tie it to, for example, yourself, and how you might exemplify through this soundtrack what your sounds might be, or what sounds you might assign, or what songs you might assign to your blueprint or your visual or oral representation, excuse me. One of the really cool things about Soundtrap is that there is a share button where you can add people and you can collaborate on time, and you could have like as many people as you'd like on the same platform. So I did a project and I did it with like 8 other people, and we were working at the same time, but we were all in different spaces creating something beautiful together and at the end. So that was really cool. These were designs that were inspired by music. So let's go ahead and take a look at the first one here. This is called, if I pronounce this wrong, the Deong Gallery and House in Seoul, South Korea. It takes architectonics and music, and it was inspired by a sketch of music described in symphony of modules. Looking at this, it involves geothermal heating, cooling, and the use of natural light in all of its spaces. Going to the second picture, this is called the Dancing House in Prague, Czech Republic. It represents the historic transition from a communist regime to a parliamentary democracy. And if you could see right here, this represents a girl dancing in her dress. You can see the curves. And then over here, they try to mimic the hat too. So it's actually based off a film as well, coupled with dancing skills. Here, this is called the Jewish Museum in Berlin, Germany. It uses a musical work from Arnold Schoenberg, who is famous for his atonal work. So he developed the 12-tone system, and the way that it represents here is very linear. This is called the Singing Ringing Tree in the UK. It's built out of steel pipes. This sculpture allows structure to interact with the wind, and the energy produces this beautiful song. And then last but not least, this picture is called the Sea Organ as the Dark Croatia. It's a beautiful beauty of architecture in nature, and it integrates with the sea and wind motion to create a song. The next person that we're going to look at is Jian Gang. So she's an American architect and founding principal of Studio Gang, and she really believed in the power of building relationships and social activity, and it's reflected in her designs. This is the Aqua Tower in Chicago. So at first glance, you're like, oh, it's really tall. But then when you look here, she designed in a way where you can look up or look down and sort of interact with your neighbors if you want to have a conversation. She then designed the Arcus Center for Social Justice Leadership. This was a space that was an initiative of Kalamazoo College in Michigan, whose mission is to develop and sustain leaders in human rights and social justice through education and capacity building, quote unquote. We envision a campus and world where every person's life is equally valued, the inherent dignity of all people is recognized, the opportunity to develop one pool's potential is available to every person, and systematic discrimination and structural inequities have been eradicated. So if you're looking at this blueprint here, she designed it in a way where everybody meets here in the center, and they build sort of a space where they can interact and start building a community in a way. Michael Ford. So this individual is known as the hip hop architect. He is really interested in how music and the environment can influence one another. As an architecture student in Detroit, he would listen to hip hop music And then he had an epiphany. He said, oh, architecture has always been influenced by cultural movements. Religion, for example, gave us cathedrals, and hip hop is a cultural movement too. He sits on the advisory board for the Universal Hip Hop Museum, which is slated to open this year. But he's really big on how like model making and music go hand in hand. And it kind of makes me think, oh, there's another individual, another model kind of redesigning this space or rethinking about this space and how you can start building connections. He states, in our hip hop architecture camps, we have kids count syllables and identify rhyme schemes and patterns and lyrics, and then they visually represent this in bar graphs that look similar to city skylines. So I think that's really beautiful and amazing that they do that. Okay, so I know that was a lot. Usually these projects, of course, are scaffolded much longer, and obviously we would have a lot more time to really kind of think about it. But I want to invite you to kind of go through the process of me. And you're going to do a class activity where you're discovering, reflecting, imagining, thinking, and growing. And you can be inspired by what I've talked about, but you can also use what you know about your own ideas and experiences. And so what you're going to do for 5 minutes while I'm playing this video is you're going to take these markers, and these are all like you can write on it. And you're going to walk around and meet people, and you're going to design this imaginative space that explores relationships between individuals, communities, and environments. So I did this earlier this week with the doctoral, my doctoral colleagues, and I said, okay, what would you design? And so they talked about that they would redesign our practice rooms, because our practice rooms are dark and closed off, and nobody really wants to interact with each other. So they said that they would like build in clear glass so that, you know, you're kind of saying, oh, you're suffering through that piece too. Okay, we can suffer together kind of deal. So I'm gonna put some markers here. And once the video ends, we'll kind of talk a little bit about what we do. Okay, you have 5 minutes to go ahead and get up and kind of figure this out together.
Some of the markers may not work. I'll try to do this. So we can like throw them away if they're bad. Yeah, if they're bad, if they stop working, throw them
Hi, how are you?
I'm like, let's.
So it's the section of community, environment, individual.
I'm not playing well with others. I'm so sorry. Shut up, it is too. All right, that was working.
Trying to see if there are more in the other room.
I'm trying. So for me, I'm just like trying. I'm just like. All right. So one thing, I don't know. I'm just like.
Where's that twat?
Any more markers?
I saw it. I was like, okay, you guys like this. That'll be 4,000.
It's great, I love it.
What I described for music is that.
I wanted to go to the reality. And I'm just thinking something.
Yeah, well, we're gonna change it, we're doing it next Friday now.
It's
It's rescheduled for this, next Friday. So all afternoon on Friday. Yeah, we were like really.
My
Yes, my mother. I have one friend who like.
Inspire ground.
Very rare.
I try to cook it, my partner is still trying
Yeah, that's why I married my. I love to cook. My dog has a doctor. Everything I do, like, she's
So what is this representing?
Yeah.
I'll let you do your thing.
Walking path?
What's up?
Deal over crowds.
Walking paths, however you need to. Really get in and out. And you can move through that neighborhood. This is what a town should look like. And this is the way out.
Kind of.
These are fast ways to the edge.
I know.
You once saw a documentary, you saw a TED Talk. Where this was
Oh my gosh,
discussed.
when I start talking to Max about stuff, he's like, "Look, mom, this doesn't need to be
Yeah.
checked out."
Funny, is it?
I'm just done with dissertation. Hi, everyone, so we're gonna start kind of sharing a little bit about our office. Starting us off right. Feels all right.
Okay.
Let's go ahead and share some of our creations, because I'm very intrigued about some of this. So over on this table, if you'd like to join here, we can go over and share a little bit about what we got. All right. Who would like to go first?
Like, oh my God, oh my
I
God.
don't know if any of us were on the same page.
It was very open-ended. This is very open-ended.
You might as well go first, since you're talking already.
Volunteer.
Okay. So this is just a spiral with a big cross section in it, but it's redesigning neighborhoods based around transportation that doesn't involve cars, which requires these long grid systems that don't really go anywhere.
Won't save gas.
Well, no, you wouldn't be able to use a car in the center. It would be meaningless because you'd be doing circles like that. But this allows you to compact housing more. So you could have large preserved sections for like gardens, for instance, but you could also have neighborhoods here at the same time, but you're never really. Because right now we have these small chunky buildings. Think of how much space we miss on campus because we've got roads that
Go nowhere.
go nowhere. They just get used by buses and a handful of angry, workers.
Let's go over here.
Oh, I didn't think I was gonna have to go. So, I guess
I sort of took the prompt literally and sort of was thinking about lots of urban communities where shade and cool places to be outside are a problem, especially in a warming world. So this was providing green space in the center of some kind of dense housing that would encourage people to go into nature, that is a protected place, that is a shady place, while providing individual residences, whether they're dorms or community housing or apartments or whatever they are, around the periphery. So you have the individual, the community space in nature.
You know me, I love nature. That is my love.
So the first thing that came to mind for me was this dream house that I've always had. And I thought it'd be really cool to make it into a school. And as an art person, I thought this would be really cool to make into a school. So the ground level when you walk in is at the ground level, right? You walk in, but then there's a whole nother level that's underneath. And inside is a courtyard that goes down to that underground level. So that it's really becomes, and it's like lots of windows, lots of glass, so that you can kind of see each other and you can see in and you can see out. And I thought that makes such a great art creative space, because my experiences have been in urban settings and the windows don't open and you can't hear the birds. Well, the birds are dead or there are no birds or whatever. And so just to have like this really huge square rectangle space that would just be flowing, I thought would be kind of fun to really kind of equalize people and to equalize space. Because a lot of times even spaces, you know,
Very confined.
well, it's confining, but it's also very hierarchy.
Yeah.
Certain people are in certain places in the building, have certain kinds of space, where other people that need maybe more in their space or more resources have less. And so to me, it was just kind of a space to kind of equalize a lot of that, but to really tie in nature, because I think that's one thing that a lot of human beings are very disconnected from. In our busy, busy tech world, because we sit in our busy tech room.
Grading.
So yeah, so I've always like wanted to have a house like that, so I thought it would make a great school. Yeah.
Would you like to share it?
I think Zena's next. I'll go after.
Goudet, or no,
Gaudi,
Dowdy.
the artist Gaudi.
The architect. There's this wonderful show on Netflix that goes into these homes that you can actually rent and in Mexico. And his work, his architecture just really has got me thinking about space, I think, from a different perspective of organic versus the geometric. So in everything in his designs, he really includes that organic, natural type of feel. So this is kind of like Dr. Seuss inspired of trees and everything being shaped in his landscape and having no rigid area, because the world and nature isn't rigid.
Gaudi. Like that's gaudy. Gaudy, that's how you say it, gaudy. Like, you know, that's a gaudy shirt or that's a gaudy sweater. That's where the word comes from, is the artist's work is so in your face. So yeah.
Yeah, I think it's like this, the serpentine. The
Yeah.
serpentine is the name of the house in Mexico. but-
Yeah. Spanish artist.
Okay, mine is more of a conceptual space, I guess, and I was thinking of a learning environment that would be ideal. And I was thinking of something that was round or circular, where all of us are intertwined and in the way that we're interacting and collaborating. So it's not a square or rectangle and there's no grid, but there's more of a kind of a circular motion in how the people in the space interact and also share their ideas. So it's an abstract doodle.
I don't know, we made a circle.
We made a circle.
Yeah, lovely. Okay, so you could go back to your seat.
Pictures, don't erase.
Thank you so much for trying creativity out. So let's go ahead and just wrap it up with some quick takeaways. You know, so with online settings, it requires community building. And even having these types of imagination and conversations can really start to, you know, like you're talking to one another, like, oh, why did you do that? Oh, I relate to you, or maybe I kind of disagree with that. And it helps students, you know, derive meaning in the tasks that we construct for them. And it kind of has made me rethink about like how I might do this from a music education point of view. Tasks should be student-centered, you know, that, you know, the basic from these formal, more formal role. And I really believe that, you know, educators are just not just architects and musicians, we are relationship builders. And, you know, even when you're talking about nature, you know, we need to kind of go away from nature and maybe disconnect from the things that occupy us a little bit more. Just really thinking about that. Yeah, if there are any other takeaways that you thought of that I haven't discussed or anything, I would love to hear it. But anyways, thank you so much. I appreciate Anna for inviting me to do a presentation there. It's nice to get out of the music space and get over here. And I was telling my colleagues, I said, I'm going to the arts place.
We need more music, so bring more music to us.
Yeah, you can collaborate.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Question, Zena setting up. So I'm curious, when you mentioned your vulnerability, right, in sharing, say, the blueprint or the soundscape, how is it that you overcome that with your students? Right, when you're asking them, opening up to that level of vulnerability for themselves, what is it that you find necessary to serve as kind of a precursor? Does that make sense?
Yeah, like how I'm asking them to be vulnerable.
Right.
When I don't present that kind of way, like I have to just sit and get a conversation.
Oh, no.
They can tell if you're so like they understand like I'm interested in that.
Bring the markers.
What?
Bring the markers.
Oh,
yeah. Oh, she wants to play. This one's dead, so just leave this one here for those rooms.
Yeah, this table drawing stuff is pretty cool.
And I was thinking this would be great in a
I want
classroom.
table drawing.
Oh, yeah, table drawing. Just for thumbnail sketches, like so much fun to do. Just like in class, like brainstorm on your table.
Yes, I love that. I have let students do that. I mean,
Like little people would just stick drawing on the table, like, oh my gosh, can you imagine them drawing on their house? I'm drawing on their house.
Right, they just coming over to your house then and being like.
My kids are on the wall, so I don't care.
Yeah, we drew in, when I was in school, we
Yeah,
drew
actually,
in
I'm
on
gonna
the
say,
table, but it
like,
wasn't like a race.
yeah, same, exactly.
Probably wasn't good drawings.
You were not.
No, my mom always took notes on the countertop, like always for my countertop.
Yeah.
On the back of it, everything. She used to take notes, and then when she was done, she wiped it off.
Oh, that's fun. My dad taught my daughter, my oldest, how to do tic-tac-toe, and so she was doing them all over the house, and I'm like, no. I give her a space in her bedroom on the wall, and she loved it, yeah.
I think it's something we experiment with.
You have very beautiful kids.
Thank you. You must take after their mother.
Take after their mother.
Yes, so if, well, I guess a lot of you don't know, that's my husband. So my name is Zena Trudetic Kirby, and I just defended successfully my defense. Nice to be able to do this without my committee members here. I love them, but it's so nice to just speak about what I really have, you know, accomplished and what I have seen and my implications for future studies. So yeah, as you can see here, this is my home with my 2 children. And the title of my research is A Feminist Teaching Art Residency Informed by an Ethics of Care. So inspired by the potentials of feminist family art residencies, as well as Nell Nodding's feminist theory, Ethics of Care, my participatory action research study, is an exploration of how my children and I experienced revisioning our home and homeschooling as a feminist teaching art residency informed by an ethics of care. Our art residency, distinct from other conceptions of artist residencies, is best characterized as the experience and process of creating art that is plural, collective, and collaborative. At the heart of the study and the design is a commitment to feminist, hegemonic cultural narratives, challenging and recognizing the knowledge of students, questioning the hierarchy of ways of knowing, for example, expert versus experiential learning, and renegotiating and reinforming the connection between teacher and student. Combining collaborative and dialogic participatory research methods, my children and I used photo voice, interviews, and daily journaling to collect data. The curriculum was site-specific to our home of indoor and outdoor learning. By positioning home as primary educator and sharing in curriculum design and research with my children, my study offers an explorative model for art educators and encourages ways to examine one's pedagogy from a theoretical grounding in care. Particularly compelling about our art residency model and research with my children are the findings that care not only manifests itself in various forms through the theory that was occupied, but it also demands a vulnerability and attitude of willingness to recognize moments of necessity and opportunities for cultivating care. That was very academic, sorry. So the research question that was really driving my research was, what art education, curriculum, and pedagogical experiences will emerge from exploring the 4 key components of Nell Nodding's ethics of care, i.e. modeling, dialogue, practice, and confirmation within a 17-day home-based teaching art residency that was conceptualized by my children and I. So 17 days is because it was gonna be 3 months, but they created the curriculum. So when they wanted the curriculum to end for this specific way of learning is when it ended. So it was very democratic in the way that the 17 days occurred. So why and how? So I've been homeschooling my children, and I'm just gonna do this organically. So I've been homeschooling my children for about 5 years, when my son came to me and told me that he wanted to learn in a different capacity. So the way that I was teaching him prior to my PhD was from a very rigorous kind of public school directed type of curriculum, but yet he would see me teach my students online and in schools from a different approach. So I was being kind of the enemy to myself, right? Like I was saying one thing about the feminist pedagogical collaborative type of work, and then I would go home and be like, no, this, and this. So when he came to me and said that to me, I was kind of in shock, right? Like, what am I doing here? I'm trying to tell these pre-service educators at college to really learn and pull from their students organically. And here I am at home saying, no, you have to read chapter 1 by the end of the day. And it was just not cohesive to me and my pedagogy and my mothering. So this picture was actually the first experiment where he got really interested in Rapa Nui and Easter Island. And I told him about how archaeologists had discovered, a lot of the moais, and telling him all these terminologies and teaching him about that, since art history is my background. And I ordered this digging set online, and there's little Easter Island heads, moai heads, in these blocks of clay that they get to dig out. And just that, seeing it come to life and seeing him and learning with him just was like, this is what I gotta do. So on the left-hand side for you, or right side, I taught for 10 years prior to coming into the PhD program. And I never really realized the way that I taught until I came to Penn State and realized that there was a term for it. So I do stand as a progressive feminist educator, and I'm very proud of that. And I felt that if I could shift my way of teaching at home to align with the way that I am as a teacher in an institution, that cohesively I would be a better person and my children would learn the way that I model to my students. So I resigned from my position as an educator and came here, and my life has changed dramatically, and my relationship with my children, and hopefully from my research, also other pre-service teachers' ways of teaching. So the theoretical framework of an ethics of care, I think, is really important to understand, since the theory is the framework, the structure of like a home to research. So I was able to meet the theorist that guided my research, which was absolutely incredible because she framed my research question. So I wasn't really looking necessarily at my pedagogy at first, and she said, you have to, because that's what this theory is about. This theory is about the pedagogy and positioning of an educator. So her main components are modeling, dialogue, practice, and confirmation. So ethics of care is very prominent now in the nursing field. but in education is where it started. So it started in the early 1980s. And the 4 key components are modeling, is that we model care to our students. And dialogue, care is modeled through dialogue, but dialogue is non-prescribed. So we come to every single conversation that we have with somebody. He's left out. So we come to every single conversation without an outcome. So in doing that, there's no hierarchy. There's not me against you or whatever. We listen, we take in. And if we do that with our students, really wonderful things in learning happen and occur. So it's really kind of taking that teacher-centered, right, of like what I'm doing here, and rather being student-centered. So practice is when we model care, we come with open dialogue of care. Then we see our students and our children and humans that we model this to practicing what we do. And the last one of confirmation in her components is confirming that care, that we see it, there's affirmation, we know that this theory is then working as in front of our eyes, okay? So this was the base bone of my research. So participatory action research is the methodology that I used for this, and this picture was actually taken by my husband. We transformed our garage into a studio. This encounter here of learning was I cared for what my child wanted to learn. And my son and my husband are in Boy Scouts together, and my husband had to go and get fingerprinted for working with children. And my son had no idea, had never heard that adults had to get fingerprinted before. So just that evolved into finding out what are fingerprints. And like dogs' noses are like fingerprints, and volar pads, and all this scientific interdisciplinary type of learning that occurred just by one question that my son had asked that morning. And we ended up creating a mural together by taking our fingerprints and collaboratively realizing how important fingerprints are and how distinct and individualized they were. And mind you, this is an 8-year-old now, who now knows all about different types of fingerprints, dog noses and everything, just within this one day of learning that was sparked by my husband going and getting fingerprinted. So participatory is we collaborate together in action, right? So how we collected our data was we used photo voice, which was inspired by the Brazilian theorist Pablo Freire in the 1970s with daily journaling and interviewing. Daily journaling kind of took a dive, I would say, a quick divert in our way of doing it, because I thought that my children would want to do journaling every day, but they didn't. So I ended up doing that, which was really good because it was a way at the end of the day that I could reflect on what I was doing with my research from being an insider researcher, which means that you can't leave your research. Most people that research can leave their research at the end of the day, and I could not. So daily journaling actually became really important for me. And then interviewing, which is photo voice as a method, this is my daughter taking a picture of a mushroom outside in our front yard. So she photographs what she sees, and that photograph becomes her voice. So at the end of the day, in an interviewing process, we look at the photographs together, and then what gets derived from that conversation becomes that curriculum, and then for the next day. So the research design was inspired, the design itself was inspired by a German group of women artists. And what they did during the pandemic was they had to homeschool their children. So they went ahead and created kind of this performance art online with other mothers so that they could engage together. There's also another artist in Pittsburgh, Lenka Clayton, who does very similar things, but it's performing arts. So it's not necessarily curriculum based and looking at the pedagogy of a teacher, it's more of that fine arts approach to this, but the design of it inspired me. So because I was an insider research, which I just mentioned before, which was new to me, I felt that it would be very important to have an outside expert be able to ethically look at this and be able to align me in certain times that I need it to be. So Dr. Marissa McClure-Sweeney is a graduate of Penn State Art Education Program, and she teaches at the Pennsylvania Pennsylvania, Indiana University. I think that's the name of it.
University of Pennsylvania.
Yes, there we go. It's a mouthful. It's taking 2 states, and putting them together. So, so she agreed to be on the study, and what I would do is at the end of every day, I would create my journal and I would send it to her and have another set of eyes look at it. And then she would come back at me with kind of this outside approach of, okay, well, maybe, if Andrew doesn't want to participate, how do you handle it in this way, right? And there were days that my son and my daughter did not want to participate in the residency, which my husband works from home and he was able to be an adult figure in that space. So the themes that emerged from my research was obviously, I knew the components of the 4 ethics of care were going to emerge. So in the photographs, modeling, dialogue, practice, and confirmation, but the other, in data coding, the inductive approach, which is what emerges when you're trying to do your data, is mothering and educating, identity, emergent negotiated curriculum, and anti-childism. So those were the ones that emerged in data coding along with the 4 key components. And they actually, since I've defended and submitted my dissertation, they now coincide. So what I ended up doing was I could see modeling and mother and educating, so I put those 2 together. And then in dialogue, that was a lot in negotiated curriculum because we had to talk to each other about what was happening in the curriculum. So the first theme of mothering and educating, this is in our backyard at our house. And the garden took on pretty much the site of a lot of our learning. And it was really beautiful because our home got transformed into this educational place. So these cone flowers, echinacea, my children learned about tea making and about seeds and how birds carry them. And then one of our cone flowers got a disease on it. So we learned about the disease that actually destructs the flower. And then all the honeybees that would come to our garden and the importance of bees on this earth and planet. And in this moment right here, I had just taught Cora how to use the camera that she was going to use for the study. And she was so happy and dancing around. And it was just very joyful to be present with my children in this time because of being a PhD student candidate and a mother and a wife and all these titles that come along with it and the stressors. For these 17 days, it was just me and my children, and it was just the most glorious time ever. So if this is what occurred in my research, how does that occur in a classroom with a teacher doing it in this type of model? And that's really what derived out of this. So the identity as a theme came where my son, I dismantled the construct of gender in the kitchen, teaching my son that it doesn't matter if you're a male or a female or non-binary, that you can be what you want to be in the kitchen. So I taught him about cooking and he was very happy about that. He would play, he has his DeLorean and Marty McFly back there. And it became fun, right? So I made cooking fun because it's a necessity for us in life, right? And then through that, the identity of me came out too, where I originally went to college for photography. And in being an educator for so long, my passion for photography dwindled because it was something that I needed to instruct instead of being the artist. And there was always that line, right, that divide. And this research really helped bring that divide to an end because I was able to teach, I was able to be present with my son, who would be my student, and create art at the same time. So I created this kitchen series where I was able to look at all the objects that I interact with on a daily basis in the kitchen and create it from a studio perspective. So for instance, bagels coming up in the toaster, we take it for granted to just pull it out, but to actually pause and look at the beauty of the texture of a bagel and converting it into this high contrast black and white was really important for me to kind of just look at this kind of aspect of what I do on a daily basis from a different perspective. And just the beauty that is in, like, the onion and the measuring cup that Melissa had gotten me, and yogurt to maple syrup, and just that beautiful contrast. Oh,
Stephanie, I'll leave.
Stepped out, yeah. What'd you pick?
You got tired, it's taking.
I don't know. Oh, it's because I like to move around.
Do you hit a button? Or cord?
Oh, mirror displays?
Yeah.
That's it. Should I disconnect it and reconnect it? Is that it? Okay. I'll be mindful of that. Mirror Creston. Oh, you know why? Maybe I went offline. I have to go to.
No.
Or see how I'm not online.
Is that person who's doing infectious disease nearby?
Who's that?
Do you know that person who's doing infectious
Brandon?
What? Sorry, what?
Oh, the other lady. Oh, no, he's just asking.
No,
No, I don't know where she went.
she had to take care of something else.
Oh, yeah.
And then I said, "Oh, we're in the room." And then I broke the room.
You want to pause the recording while we're troubleshooting?
Absolutely.
So how are you, Luke?
Well, yourself?
I mentioned seeing it about 3 weeks ago. That's where I'm at.
That's not a good place to be.
It's not. I have to have my first full draft in on
And just
Sunday.
a second to boot up again.
to my editor. That's where I'm at.
I'm going to take credit for
Good
that.
job.
It didn't work before. You did something.
I
Now
did
it
something, and
works.
it's working.
Yeah.
I'm going to take credit for it right now.
So I don't know why it's not in presentation mode anymore, but it's okay. So, so then the second theme that came up was the emergent negotiated curriculum, which was aligning with the dialogue from Nell Notting's Ethics of Care. So my children seem to be very much into Bigfoot and the conspiracy behind Bigfoot and does it exist or not, right? I know it's fun. And that's what made this so great was that their passions, right, really made me want to learn about all this too. And as an educator, if we bring that into our classroom and pool the passion from our students, it makes your job as an educator so much more important and fun too. And fun, I think, is the key word, right? To learn through a fun way. So we read a book, which was up at the top, Bigfoot and Littlefoot. And then we created these site-specific sculptures out of plywood that I am very proud of myself because I learned how to use a jigsaw. And I had never done that before. So it was great. And I never worked with a medium of wood before too. So that was nice as well. So these two images show my children and I creating these sculptures together, but also the identity behind it too. So we made four in our family. My husband's is actually the one on the bottom, and my children and I sketched them out together. And the incorporation of interdisciplinary learning was mathematics and science. We learned about how scientists try to look for Bigfoot, right? And mathematically proportions and circumference and all that came into this. And then we learned about sight for site specificity in our home and our land and placement. And what derived of this was just something so fun that our neighbors love to look at, and they do, and it's something that we could talk about, so it brings up dialogue with us. And my daughter said that I should be wearing high heels. So I don't wear high heels. And it was really interesting to me that she identified me with that. So that was a perfect spot to pause in that emergent curriculum and ask her why. And she said, oh, because I see Barbies always wearing high heels and girls wearing high heels. And it was just so perfect because I was able to explain to her that, yes, I like to wear makeup. And every once in a while I'll put a heel on, but it doesn't define who I am. as a woman, right? And she was like, oh, so you can just wear whatever? And I'm like, I am totally a Birkenstock person, but I'm a woman, you know, and you could be that and not have to do that. So that was really important in that emergent curriculum. And I don't know if it has stuck with her as far as me not wearing heels, because every once in a while she'll be like, oh, what about these? And I'm like, no, it's okay. But it was really important during this time. So we made them into black for silhouettes. And it was so fun to learn about this with them. So then the other theme that emerged was anti-childism, which was new to me. I did not know about this prior to my research. So in life, we go through meeting people, and possibly a lot of you maybe had this experience with parents, but treating us as children, that we don't have a voice. So you're seen, but you're not heard type of thing, right? Like at holidays, oh, the children sit at this side and the adults sit at this side. And I had never ever did that with my children ever. And I didn't know that there was something associated with that, similar to me as an educator, not knowing the term that I was as an educator. So Melissa McClure-Sweeney introduced me to this theory, and it's really making children be known as and seen as humans and as adults, and that their voice is just as important as us. So this image is of my daughter, and this was a day that my son did not want to participate in the residency. And I had asked her what she wanted to do, and she said that she wanted to be like me this day. So I get emotional about this because it was after the Bigfoot with the high heels. So the next day she said, well, I want to be like you, and I want to go grocery shopping, and I want the grocery store to be our learning encounter for the day, because you go to the grocery store and you cook, and I want to see how you do that. So we went up into her room, and instead of grabbing a skirt or a dress or high heels, right? She picked something similar to what I would wear, which is jeans and a sweatshirt. And that was like really interesting to me, because she really took what we had learned the day before and applied it to that day. And that day at the grocery store was so fun, because I taught her about price tags and numbers, and this number is more than that number. She's 5 years old. So teaching her math through the grocery store, and colors and color theory and health and placement of good food and bad food in a grocery store. So just this encounter of that day allowed for her voice, and treating her not as a child, but as somebody that I could learn from too. So my implications in this background is actually part of the mural that we created of the fingerprints. So my implications are for our educators, and not just our educators, but humans and other educators of different fields, to really look at themselves and their place in how they teach or how they interact with other humans. And if we take this care approach of modeling care and respecting humans and students and children, and we come to a dialogue and a conversation without being, predetermined or prescribed, and we see the confirmation of the practice of who we're interacting with, of our students or children or spouses, it really is a cohesive, positive, I think, just beautiful way of living. So my implications for our educators specifically is to reconstruct their classrooms as a residency. And by that, it's because residencies as a whole are very exclusive. If you're an art educator, you have to take sabbatical, and you have to leave your place of teaching to go and experience this place where you don't have distractions from your daily obligations. You can just create. And that's just not able to happen for a lot of us, especially as parents. So if we take that art educator and we make it cohesive, the teacher becomes the artist in the classroom with the students, creating in a residency type environment, similar to what my children and I did. So that's it. Don't want to ruin this, Brendan.
We'll see.
you ruined it. Way to go. This one off again.
So I'm the last presenter and I am Lizzo Park and I'm a first year doctoral student in art education program. And I would like to talk about the implications of new media art projects that incorporate artificial intelligences and algorithms for art pedagogy. So like I've been working in museums for, I have worked in museums for like 7 years when I was in Korea. So I'm from Korea, and so basically like I worked with new media artists to create public programs such as performances and lecture series, and also like workshops and screening series. And I was really fascinated how the technologies that they are incorporating into the art projects create really effective and very interactive and sensorial learning experiences that really go beyond when the learning experiences that we have with very conventional mediums. So coming from that background, so I've been exploring how emerging technologies will reshape our pedagogical approaches in our education. So my research has developed around this question. So what will future art classrooms look like where human teachers and non-human technologies, such as like AI, robots, and algorithms co-facilitate teaching and learning? We are like surrounded by a lot of digital devices in this room as well. And I was kind of imagining like, what if we as educators share our responsibilities for teaching with these non-human technologies. It's because like advanced technologies radically transform the ways we perceive and experience the world. And the ontology of artificial intelligences and machine learning and algorithms is actually omnipresent in today's everyday life, affecting our daily communications and decision-making and consumption as well. So I thought we need a new framework to conceptualize the entangled relationships between humans and non-human machines. But I found that like while I was researching, I found that our educators and also researchers haven't really talked about these emerging technologies in our field. So I thought we really need to address these topics in order to teach digital-born students more creatively and also critically in this evolving media environment. So a little academic here. So according to feminist philosopher Rosie Gray Doty, so humans and machines have developed unprecedented degrees of intimacy and intrusion in their relations. So these disruptive existences have actually permeated the everyday life of human beings and entangling moods of ontology and questioning dualistic distinctions between species actually. So scholars from various fields of study ranging from physics to feminist philosophy have discussed the ontological inseparability and blurred boundaries between humans and non-human others, including animals and machines, through the theories of post-humanism. So, and
Also, the symbiotic relationships between humans and computers have also discussed in science, which contributes to envisioning human-machine collaboration and partnerships. And I found a few scholarly investigations to revisit our conceptualization of relationships between humans and technologies. So Dr. Aaron Knopko, who is a associate professor in our education program, explored Adobe Photoshop software as a non-human collaborator and hidden curriculum. And also Dr. Karen Kiefer-Boyd et al. Also explored the configurative agency generated between human users and mobile technology. And also there were 2 articles about AI and also art education. The relationship between AI and its implications for our education. So I looked at how new media artists incorporated AI and algorithms in their practices and how their work could provide implications for our education research. So what is prominent in the ways contemporary artists employ AI and computer algorithms is that these technologies serve as active agents to operate the work rather than as just mere instruments or tools. And in the process of art creation, artists and algorithmic intelligence cooperate to construct the work in symbiotic relationships. The creative artist hidden in the algorithms questions the traditional notion of subjectivity and objectivity, complicating the ecology of art creation. And also artists examine blurred boundaries and entangled relations. And lastly, a wide range of issues are explored, such as surveillance, privacy, algorithmic bias, and new modes of communications between humans and machines. So I mainly examined like 3 new media art projects: Non-Facial Portrait by Shin Seung-baek Kim Yong-hoon, and Please Feed the Lions by S. Dublin, and Perception.io by Karen Palmer. So for their work, Non-Facial Portraits, the artist collective Shin Seung-baek Kim Yong-hoon invited 10 painters to draw a portrait with a peculiar role. So the face of the portrait must not be detected by computer vision. So the artists installed 3 computer vision algorithms in a camera that live streamed the process of painting portraits so the painters could refer to. So I'm gonna show a really short clip here. You can see some of the parts are detected as face area through the algorithm.
Oh, cool.
So as we can see, painters should come up with their own creative approaches to tackle the quest to draw a portrait in which human viewers would recognize the face, but computer algorithms do not. So once one of the algorithms detects a face in one's painting, the painter needs to revisit and modify previous strokes, distort shapes or color compositions that may constitute a face, or search for different shape arrangements. So the project resulted in 10 different portraits, none of which failed to have computer vision detect a face. So in the process of painting non-facial portraits, algorithms and painters mutually affect each other's next decisions and actions, which can be illustrated as an example of human-computer symbiosis. So this project casts critical questions to viewers. If the painting does not feature the face of a human subject, can we still consider it as a portrait? What makes us as humans view the paintings as portraits, even though they lack elements of a face? And the question of a space that human vision recognizes, but computer vision doesn't, can be further discussed in the realm of creativity. So the Please Feed the Lions is an interactive social sculpture which was installed in the Trafalgar Square in London. And as part of the London Design Festival in partnership with Google Arts and Culture. So this work invites the public to submit a word that expands into 2-line poem through the algorithms that have been trained on millions of words from 19th century poetry. So LED screen embedded in the mouth of the lion sculpture continues to show new poems as visitors feed the lion with different words that come to their mind, and which eventually forms a collective poem in the end. So I have another short clip about it.
Monster.
Reason. Nelson.
Gratitude.
Orange. Reconciliation.
So Ross Goodwin Creative Technologies of this project developed algorithms in which a machine can think and learn that at the meta level by writing its own algorithm that has learned that it's an algorithm for writing. So basically creative codes and algorithms that train themselves to write poems. And this raises pedagogical questions of subjectivity in art. So how can we redefine the role of artists in this context? So is it the algorithm that is creative in the process of generating poems, or the human artist and developer? And in the playful and very symbiotic process of feeding words and writing a poem, visitors actively engage with the AI behind the scenes, through which the boundary between human creativity and machine creativity becomes more undiscernible. And the last project that I would am going to introduce is Perception.io by Karen Palmer. And it is an interactive, immersive film commissioned by the Cooper Hewitt Smithsonian Design Museum. And in this work, participants are given the role of a police officer who is supposed to watch a series of 2 films and come to interact with a Black protagonist and white protagonist in each scenario. And its purpose is to train an AI system for future law enforcement. The computer vision systems installed in a camera track the visitor's facial experiences expressions to analyze how they feel when interacting with the protagonists. And their emotional responses such as like fear, calm, anger, like directly affects the consequences for characters in the film and result in different scenarios. Like for example, depending on how the participants feel about the situation, the police officer may call for assistance from his colleagues or arrest or even shoot the character in the scenario. So here's another short clip about this work.
Please stand right there. You stand still. Keep your hands so I can see them. You're in the neighborhood. At the description. Keep your hands. Come on, hold my hands. No, you cannot. Keep your hands off. You don't have to stop.
Yep, so participants are provided with opportunities not only to be reflexive for their own implicit biases, which may affect their bodily responses, but also to examine the consequential effect that their preconceptions may have. And this experience can be extended to understanding how prevalent AI and algorithms are trained on biased data sets built by humans, which may continue to recreate unjust societal systems on a digital scale. So these issues of ethics can raise further critical questions, asking whether AI or algorithms can be the moral subjects that are responsible for what they do to humans, and also the subject of moral concerns. So the implications for education that I've identified was that the interactive nature of these three art projects manifest the entangled relations that complicate boundaries between human and non-human entities. And in a mutually effective relationship to activate the work, artists, audiences, and algorithms collaborate and form a symbiotic network. And the AI and creative codes that are incorporated in these art projects challenge the conventional humanist understanding of the world, promoting new modes of creativity and subjectivity and dismantling hierarchical relations in art classrooms. Discussing alternative definitions of creativity can also enable further exploration of these intelligent non-humans as the subject of creative teaching in art classrooms. Moreover, the relational dynamics of the teacher, students, and AI can be redefined as they collaborate to construct meaningful learning experiences together. And here is a list of references, and I hope this exploration helps reframe the role of the emerging technologies as co-constitutors of our education. And thank you for listening.
So much, everyone, for coming. I have to say that it feels like it's been forever, and it feels so nice to do something creative and be around people who are passionate about their research and kind of absorb some of that passion and excitement and creativity. So it has been such a pleasure. Thank you so much. Zina, Yasul, Rain, Young I think had to leave, but thank you for being here. This was such a great experience, and I hope you enjoyed it. In the future, now that we have this great space that we can utilize. So thank you so much. I think we're gonna go out to eat. Anyone who wants to join us is welcome. It's a party. It's a kid. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ray.